This episode is partially brought to you by the Humble Choice program. Did you know Humble Bundle has a great monthly subscription service that lets you get a ton of video games every single month? That's right, from plans range from $5 to $20 a month, you get a hold of a bunch of free games they have available to you. And you could use our code down in the description below to go and sign up. It would help our podcast and help you see what great games are available for you this month.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final free Formula S show. For those that don't know, this show, first off, it's me, AJ, and Mike. This show is part of our Patreon paywall now. Will be after this. So if you're interested in following along, it's like one of the lowest tiers. So we didn't lock it behind some crazy number, but we've talked about it in the past, Mike and I have, where we're putting some of the shows behind paywalls just because they take either more time, just like straight up time, or they have an extra cost incurred, or things like that. So it's more of kind of making it not necessarily worth it, but they're a little tougher to, or a little more involved, I should say, than regular shows. So as I say, it's not super expensive to get into it, but it will be behind that paywall. That being said, got some fun stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, I was about to say, our show notes look very talkative versus like stuff that happened just because it's been off season.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we didn't do a final one for the end of the 21 season. To give my very brief thought on how the season ended. I think that's purely for Drive to Survive, the way that they had that end. Do I think Lewis should have won? Yes. Am I butthurt about it? No. Should fans be mad? No. That, if you're a fan of Hamilton, you shouldn't feel like Red Bull did something wrong. If you're a Red Bull fan, you shouldn't feel like you got away with something.
But they did.
Michael Massey just collapsed under pressure, and that's why he's no longer there. Yeah, but so as we're recording this, testing wrapped up for the new cars, and I think it's going to be an interesting year, at least in the beginning, because for those that don't know, there are new cars for the 22 year. And basically, so these cars are more reliant on what's called ground effect. This is something that F1 had back in the 70s and 80s. And then they kind of banned the use of it. IndyCar uses something very similar. So basically, it's ground effect is when you take air and shove it under the car and have aerodynamic elements underneath the car. Effectively, what it does is it sucks the car to the ground. So it's not necessarily dependent on the front wing, the rear wing, things like that. So in theory, these cars can follow behind easier. They're less affected by what's called dirty air, which is that comes off a car behind it. It's basically the best way to describe it is if the air is still before a car passes through it, when the car passes through it, what comes out behind is basically little vortexes that roll off the car. And so that air doesn't work, or it doesn't follow the laws of physics that still air does. So the wings aren't as effective. Whereas ground effect, it doesn't care, right? It's just air that's going underneath the car. It's why, like, if you watch the Indy 500, those cars can follow so close, doing 240 miles an hour and then take a turn and keep following that close, because effectively in an Indy car, especially at the Brickyard, that's where it's most, like, the difference is the greatest between how much air is produced on top of the car and how much is produced below it, how much downforce. And the idea is, like, if this car can effectively suck itself to the ground, it's not as dependent on the front and the back kind of pushing the car down.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting sucked down, and then the top forces from the wings help as well. So kind of the effect that we're seeing in F1 is what's called porpoising.
I just want to point out that's the best term you've used so far, is porpoising.
Well, that's what it's actually called that. So if you go on, like, YouTube and watch highlights from testing, you'll see, like, the Mercedes had issues with it. Ferrari did it first, but then they figured it out, where basically for ground effect to work the best, you want the car to be as low to the ground as possible. The thing that gets interesting is you're basically creating a cushion of air underneath the car. And what can happen is, because what you want to do is keep that cushion moving. Don't want it to stall out and create a vacuum. So what happens is, when a car porpoises, it's at speed, basically the rear wing is producing enough downforce that it is closing off the back of the, so the air's not able to get out, and it bounces. So, and they call it porpoising. Ferrari seems to have the porpoising issue figured out the best as of right now. So if you're looking to make some money and sports betting is legal in your state, I would look and see what the over-under is for Ferrari wins. Probably take the over.
Really?
Because they might be able to sneak a few out here in the first few races.
So you're saying I should do that, so you're telling me. I understand.
I mean, you can. Like, if you want to try to make some money off of it, you can go for it. But that's where I would say, if Ferrari stands a chance to make an impact this year in terms of the final standings, it's going to be early on, basically getting out in front, and then Red Bull and Mercedes catching up to them and then surpassing them, versus Ferrari trying to stay with Red Bull and Mercedes. And obviously, like, Mercedes and Red Bull will figure this out sooner rather than later.
Or you just think Ferrari is uniquely built to handle it out the gate?
Ferrari just figured it out. We're not quite sure how. One of the ways that actually you can solve porpoising is basically just making the suspension as stiff as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is that car is going to be a brick in the sense of there's no give. So any sort of like running wide onto the rumble strips, that car is going to start bouncing, basically.
So if you ever starts weaving too much, you're screwed.
Yeah, so like if you're trying to get the fastest lap possible, you kind of run out onto those rumble strips, and you got to be careful with super, super stiff suspension, because the car will hit those, and the whole car will move, not just the wheel, and use suspension, and the car stays fairly level.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and it's kind of a crapshoot, right? Because Haas gave up on their car last year to focus on this car. So it's the question of, did they? And all reports state that from the first testing in Barcelona, that the Haas was the most developed car. Obviously, that being said, like Mercedes came back to Bahrain for the second test with a side pod design that was basically non-existent. Really interesting look. Red Bull's got a new side pod. Ferrari still has the dishes, which I think that car looks sexy. But yeah, I mean, it'll be this year more than any in recent memory. Maybe even back to 2014 when the hybrid came in. This year could be the biggest shakeup in terms of. I have a feeling Mercedes and Red Bull are still going to finish one. Like those two teams are going to kind of distance themselves. But we could see like the fight for 3 could be really fun to watch. And we could even see, you know, some of the lower teams, you know, like a Haas, like an Alfa Romeo, like a Williams, kind of stepping into what the midfield was last year, like getting points, getting results. Because, I mean, 2 of the 3 lower tier teams, Alfa Romeo and Haas, are both Ferrari powered. Interesting thing there is Ferrari, Alfa, Haas all did very well on speed. Alpine, so the Renault powered cars, they're just Alpine right now. They appear to be going for broke. Like max power, 0 reliability. They're min-maxing in that sense. And the Red Bull Honda cars, Red Bull AlphaTauri, they are kind of going along with what they had last year. And then Mercedes is Mercedes and Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And Aston Martin are just going to be doing their thing. On the topic of Haas.
Haas.
This is about to get political because of one particular party. Obviously, you know, the horrors that are going on in Ukraine right now kind of played the hand of F1. So they canceled the Russian Grand Prix. Just they took it off the schedule.
I thought. Go on. Yeah.
Well,
I was confused with FIFA. I was about to say I thought there was something about Russian things still play. That's FIFA where they removed Russian teams, but like Russian players can still play under a different flag or whatever it was.
So the FIA did something like that, where the drivers could sign like a memorandum that said like they're not going to race under the Russian flag, but they'll race under basically what they did in the Olympics. So like, you know, Russian drivers.
Yeah, it's something like the Federation of Russian. Yeah, I've heard there's a term, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
So that was a whole thing. Like a bunch of the drivers came out before they canceled the race. Like Sebastian Vettel was very vocal about. He's like, I'm not running that race. Like even if we have it, I'm not running it. Which to have, you know, one of the two. Yeah, I think there's only. I guess Fernando's on the grid. Yeah. One of your 3 champions that are on the grid between Lewis, Vettel, and Alonso. One of the 3 was like, I'm not racing. Like just straight up, I'm not going to do it. Lewis probably would have said the same if they didn't cancel the race. So, or at least he would have said that if the championship was tight, he would.
Well, yeah, because
yeah. So they canceled the race, and then the next question became, okay, so what's Haas going to do? Because for those that don't know, Haas has been sponsored by Uralkali, which is a Russian gas company. And obviously they had Nikita Mazepin as a driver. Well, Haas was kind of back and forth about it. And then finally, they're just like, we terminated Mazepin's contract. We terminated the contract with Kali. More basically. And Mazepin threw a bitch fit because about 2 days after his contract was canceled, he and his father were both sanctioned. So not just his father, he was as well, along with Kali. So Haas is in a better position than, like, for example, Chelsea Football Club is owned by Roman Abramovich, who got sanctioned. Well, Roman wasn't able to sell the club before he got sanctioned. So the club is one of his assets. All your assets are frozen. So, like, Chelsea is in a situation. And Haas really avoided a potential shit show. And in firing Mazepin, obviously you have a driver open. There were a lot of rumors. Oh, it could be Pietro Fittipaldi. It could be Nico Hülkenberg. It could be Kevin Magnussen. It could be Roman Grosjean, the former Haas drivers. There were a couple others that were floating around there as rumors, and Pietro Fittipaldi stepped in to do some testing. But then it was announced that Kevin Magnussen would in fact return to Haas and drive there for the 22 season. For those that were following his career, it's a little interesting because he had to get out of several other contracts in order to do this. Kevin was part of the IMSA Cadillac team. He was also going to be a driver for Peugeot in WEC, the World Endurance Championship. So he had some contracts there that he had to get out of, but he said it was kind of easy to do. Which, when you were hearing some of the other names, like Callum Ilott, who's in IndyCar this year, you're like, man, could have done that and gotten some F1 seat experience. That being said, also, Kevin Magnussen is kind of a fan favorite. So it's also a very good PR move in that sense. But yeah, I have got the final times for testing, which this is the final testing session in Bahrain, day 3. Max Verstappen out front with a 1:31.72, which somebody was equating to basically it was a racing lap, more or less. So this is a lap that you'll see on track this year. I wouldn't be surprised if Pole is in the low 1:30. Huge surprise in second, Mick Schumacher for Haas.
Haas was not that high, I thought, last year.
No, they were dead last. With a 1:32.241. So he was still half a second behind. But then we've got Charles Leclerc, Alonso. George Russell is the first Mercedes, and he's in 5th. A full second behind Verstappen. Then we've got Valtteri, Tsunoda, Perez, Norris, Vettel, Guan Yu Zhou, Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, Albon and Latifi, Lance Stroll, then Lewis Hamilton in 17th, and then Kevin Magnussen in 18th. We only had 18 run for the final day. I think this could be a situation where, like I said, we might get a result that not a lot of people are expecting in terms of, if Haas can keep up this pace. If Haas can pull off this pace, because the race is in a week from when we're recording this.
Mm-hmm.
If they can keep this pace up, Haas is in for points. If Haas is in for points, that is a huge turnaround. A massive turnaround. So, it's going to be interesting to see. Like, good. Red Bull, Haas, Ferrari. Red Bull, McLaren, Aston. Both Williams. So one of the Alpines didn't run. And
so why wouldn't they run? Do you think they're just not ready?
It could be any sort of thing. It could be, the person was gone, or...
Yeah, because you don't need to run the test, right? You a lot of times you want to, but you don't need to.
Daniel Ricciardo didn't run because he tested positive for COVID.
But that's...
So there's our two. The other Alpine and then Daniel Ricciardo.
I'm still very interested by their COVID policies, considering you're a solo racer in a car, but...
Yeah.
Like, this isn't like even other sports or whatever where, like, you're in contact with people. You could physically isolate someone 100%.
Yeah. It is weird. I can understand from the... I don't know, like, the health aspect in terms of, like, energy and fatigue and things like that.
It's like it'd be a case by case versus a policy to me then.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I find interesting. Like, that one to be like if you have COVID, here is what you're allowed to do, and one should be like, that's what, like, versus like you're not allowed to.
Well, it could also be a country thing. Like,
mm-hmm.
Bahrain's policy might be such that if you test positive, here's the result. Here's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, F1 is kind of like, also they want to be as cautious as possible. Because think about the reality of them, right? It's 300 people traveling around the world, and they're there for such a short amount of time. In the grand scheme of things, like, one of them could test positive, and it could have caused an outbreak, and they don't know, right? Like, the situation of we're in Austria this week, but then we're in Hungary the next, and one of the team members tested positive, like in between the travel, like during the travel days.
I do understand some of it. I just mean, like, 'cause I thought the policy was even if you test positive while there, like that, like that's the one where I find interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously they have they have the negative test thing too, where, like, if you can produce 2 negatives in 48 hours, I think.
But I'm just thinking, because like most sports at this point, especially in the U.S. and I thought even worldwide, they were starting to loosen their general COVID protocols.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if by mid-season most of this stuff is kind of like not necessarily fully gone, but very relaxed. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a disappointment, but like in his Instagram post said, he goes better this week than next.
100%.
Because I don't even know who McLaren's test driver is. Like, you don't want your drivers testing positive during these weeks. And, we get a situation like, Lewis tested positive 2 years ago, 2020. Lance Stroll tested positive, and Nico Hulkenberg had like 36 hours or something like that in F1, basically. They called him up. He was on vacation because, he's he's not tied to any one team. Like, he's not a reserve driver or anything. So he was on vacation with his family, and then gets a call, hey, we need you in Germany in 6 hours. And he flew there, quickly got, kind of fitted for stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then drove, and then had to do it, I think, after. Somebody else tested positive, so he was kind of the hitman that year.
God.
But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how going forward teams,
they handle it.
Both teams handle it and F1 handles it, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the reality of it is, like, it's gone from a pandemic to an endemic, so you just need to, like, kind of get over it. Because if we keep having these, if you test positive, you're going to be gone for a week, or until you can produce 2 negative tests in 48 hours. Like, I don't know, you're just going to see, I think you're going to see, like, half the grid go down, because it's just the reality of everything's open at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's kind of it for this show. I know it's a little shorter, but testing isn't necessarily always, like, big news.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, and, I guess kind of a preview to the season, if you will. This, as I said, this one's going to be a fun one to watch. It's going to be interesting because we've got new race directors. It's the former WEC director and the former DTM director. They're splitting the season in half, basically. So we're going to have a rotating race director. In theory, it should be a little more consistent. Who knows? Like, I think a lot of people are going to be like anything rather than Michael Massey.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Thanks. Well, yeah. So what is your thinking for the cadence of these people who are because obviously talk about this, we launch next couple weeks, I think, still, but
let's see, Formula One. Let's pull a schedule, please. We've got. Got to race the 20th to 27th. We've got the 3rd off, so we could record and post for the 3rd. A lot of these, like, we've got, a week in between races, but, like, we've got a back-to-back in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia.
Right, yeah. So that, like it was before, would we have those, like, stretches of, like...
Yeah, we're not going to try and pump out one after each race.
That would be insane.
We just don't have the time, and also our posting schedule would allow for it.
Or if we did, it would just be like a boom, boom. Like, it'd be kind of like, it'd be like a 5 minute here, 5 minute. It wouldn't make sense.
So, I guess when we have breaks in the season, like, we're going to have one on the 3rd, and then we'll have one after Australia.
Like, at least during the season, it sounds roughly like every couple weeks or once a month, something like that.
We'll post them during off weeks, basically. And then when we get to summer break.
Sounds great. Obviously, as we said, this will be kind of like, I'd call it a seasonal-ish show. It's like, but obviously, as we get kind of in a cadence with this new format, we'll let you guys know. But yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up about your formula racing?
So it looks like our summer break is basically the month of August. Hungary's the last race. It's at the end of July. And then Belgium is the 26th of August. So we've got that break there. That's going to be our summer break for the show. And then also F1 summer break.
Yeah, because there's not much to talk about when it's on a break.
Nope, not when everything's frozen. So yeah. I guess if you want to keep following the show, go to Patreon. It'll be in our Twitter. The
So you
link.
can expect.
Yeah, the link will be.
Although, expect. Yeah, they'll expect to see the link in the next couple weeks there. Otherwise, if you just subscribe to the feeds, you'll definitely get the link blasted at you at some point.
The feeds, Marty. The feeds. So, yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
This podcast was a production of The SWW Show. To learn more, go to theswwshow.com. Remember, you can follow the show on Twitter at The SWW Show. You can follow me at Mikey_Maroney. You can follow AJ at LowSeatBoy. Remember, new episodes premiere on Friday, 9 a.m. Central Time on anchor.fm/SWW and podcast services around the globe.